Hello, welcome to today's session on how to accelerate Open RAN deployments with validated solutions. Today we have John Baker, SVP of Business Development from Mavenir, Sandro Tavares, Director of Telecom Systems inside the marketing organization at Dell Technologies, and I'm Steven Spellacy, Vice President of Product Marketing for the Service Provider and Edge Business Unit within VMware. Welcome, guys. I'm glad to have you on today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you, Stephen.
So let's kick it off. We're talking about O-RAN, super exciting subject. Many of our customers, are excited about the possibilities. What is the current state of play with an O-RAN? Things are really progressing, quite quickly in the market. But John, if you can give you your view of the current state of play for Open RAN, and we'll sort of hear your feedback on this, and then move over to Sandro.
Yeah, great. Good question to start with. So just clearing up some of the terminology. So O-RAN sort of generally refers to the O-RAN Alliance and the specification process. And then Open RAN is about open interfaces for interoperable elements in the network. So and the elements are generally the radio that goes on the tower and the baseband unit that sits on the ground. So in reality, we started back 4 years ago now, I think it was, with XRAN, then it moved into the O-RAN Alliance, but getting the specifications put in place to open up those interfaces. And I think we're now on the second generation of those specifications. So great progress, and that allowed the breaking up of the RAN and vendors to really start manufacturing product. So to that extent now, we've got commercial product in the field from separate radio manufacturers. We've got, the hardware from Dell, we've got the software stacks from VMware, and we're putting the networks together. And the first commercial networks are actually being built on a global basis. So from a Mavenir perspective, we look at it, we've got deployments in Vodafone, Axiata in Malaysia, Indonesia. We're building Dish together in California, and Nevada. So it's again great progress. So we're right at the front end of an exciting time. I think you've seen 5 operators in Europe sign behind an MOU to essentially put a percentage of deployments of Open RAN into their networks, followed by I think five new operators now in Middle East Asia, or sorry, Middle East Africa, that got behind it. And signed another MOU. So we've got 10 operators behind MOUs and various other operators around the globe, committing to put Open RAN into their network. So I think, job well done to everybody, that's been on this journey, putting the specifications in place, really great progress. And, we're now starting to see the fruits of our labor with commercial orders, commercial deliveries, and live networks.
There's definitely momentum for certain. We're seeing it from our customers working with Mavenir and Dell, especially. And Sandro, on that point, what's your viewpoint of, what's happening with Open RAN and the progress you're seeing to date?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I fully agree with what John pointed out. We are really at the stage where we are leaving the discussion part and we're actually getting to the execution part. It's not that everything is sorted out. This is going to be an ongoing process for the industry, but it is great that we are taking the initial steps to actually get these solutions out there, put them to work in the field, and really start to create traction behind Open RAN. So I think that, as last year was still a year of a lot of discussion, this year is really starting to show as the year of the beginning of the execution, great deals being signed, lots of commitment from big operators, big vendors as well, to get this thing done and to really get Open RAN into the real networks that are delivering 5G to the communities right now. So great momentum for sure.
Well, the benefits we've been hearing about of Open RAN are fairly well known, opening up that particular part of the network that's been historically closed. They're well known, but there are some challenges that exist related to Open RAN architecture and things that, as a result of the architecture, come up. Sandro, what are you, from a Dell perspective, what are you doing to mitigate some of those challenges?
Yeah, so we believe that for Open RAN to be really deployed and to really overcome these challenges, it is important that we really work together as an industry, right? So that we get vendors in the different parts of the stack to work together, pre-certify solutions, test solutions, and really make sure that we can get to the field as ready as possible to streamline the deployment process. So at Dell, we are gearing up to facilitate this engagement. So we announced in June our Open Telecom Ecosystem Lab that we really expect that is going to be very central, at least with our partners. It will have a central role in enabling these interactions, bringing customers in, bringing vendors in, and getting these solutions ready to go to the field. So challenges are normal when you're moving like from one paradigm to the other in terms of network architecture and so on. That's why we're here, right? And but like the industry is moving really well in addressing those challenges. And at Dell, we are doing whatever we can to make sure that we can streamline the process and make sure that the deployment of Open RAN happens in the most efficient way as possible.
Thanks, Sandro. And John, I mean, on that, right, you're in the catbird seat as a RAN ISV, really out there on the cutting edge, if you will, helping deliver Open RAN. You know, from your viewpoint, where do you see these challenges and how are you mitigating them?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, and I talk about this as co-opetition. You know, it's a new way of working together in the industry, which is, you know, a little bit strange for certain companies, but you know, in a sense, it's competitors helping itself, you know, cooperating, improving standards, but openly competing in the marketplace. And I think co-opetition is, as I call it, is the way forward. You know, that as Sandro said, you know, that vendors working together in labs to prove interfaces to start with, and given a lot of the interface spec around the ORAN interface is new from an implementation and a deployment perspective, that you know, it's going to take time to work through some of those understandings of the specifications. And, you know, and I would take like the dish example where, you know, you've got Fujitsu, you've got MTI, you've got Dell, you've got VMware, you've got everybody, you know, in this mix. And the only way to sort of work through some of this is to sit down and work together in solving the technical issues and you know, avoid any finger pointing. You know, there's no space for finger pointing in this marketplace anymore, you know, so you know, being open, working together, solving the problems, and then compete competitively. And, you know, that is going to be how this industry really starts to evolve going forward. You know, it's going to be about developing the specifications going forward, how to leverage new technology, new ideas, but sharing the ideas so that, you know, you get the economies of scale in the marketplace. Because I think it's important to remember that, you know, as a single company, we can't generate the scale necessary to get the cost and size that this might need. So, you know, it's going to be a lot of different suppliers, you know, really all aimed at the same ecosystem, really, you know, drawing down and generating that scale. But I think it's exciting times. You know, I've been in this industry 35 years, and this is the first real reinvention, if you like, of the industry that's generating so much excitement and you know, technology challenges and new ideas that are coming in. I think that's an important point as well, is that innovation is key for making Open RAN work in the future and getting the benefits to the operators that they've been essentially starved of for the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I would say it's about time, right? You know, VMware is working with Mavenir and working with Dell and a number of engagements, working with customers all over the world. But one thing that we're doing is working on reference architectures to help, if you will, reduce that headwind as customers adopt those technologies. You know, what are some other things that are happening in the vendor community that can help our CSP customers solve some of these challenges they seek to adopt Open RAN, John?
Yeah, you put your finger on it. You know, reference architectures is really, you know, the starting position, and it's about ensuring that, you know, that everybody's working to a sort of a common model. You know, trying to avoid anybody going off a sidetrack and putting proprietary features and stuff like that into the implementation. You know, the only way we're going to get ease of deployment and really ensure that operators are not confused about products that have different functionality, if you like, is is ensuring that we work to common interfaces, common specs, and then there are areas in the spec that allow the thought processes to take you down a different path. And I think we've seen it that we've got to work closely and understand what those paths are, and essentially say, look, okay, let's park that feature or let's park that idea, but let's implement the basic processes, the basic specifications, and ensure we move forward. And to that extent, it's staying rigid to the interface specification, staying rigid to the reference architecture, because there's still a lot more work to be done. I think from a test and implementation side, that the test industry now is really starting to catch up, and the ability to write test scripts, test software, and everything else is from a supplier perspective. All the test companies like Keysight, etc., are all dependent on a common reference architecture, and we're dependent on those guys for providing test equipment that will independently test our software, etc. So it works both ways. If you deviate off the path, then you're gonna have a hard time these guys keeping up with you to produce the test scripts and test software that you need to prove your product is good and stable for the field.
Ultimately, it's about acceptance, right? As you're adopting new technologies and initiatives such as Open RAN, you really want to have confidence in the process. Sandro, from a Dell perspective, what else are you folks doing there in your telecom business to help that vendor community and our CSPs address some of these problems?
Yeah, our biggest objective is to make this whole open ecosystem in RAN and in other parts of the telecommunications architecture as well, more consumable, right? More easily consumable. And that to make that happen, I talked about the Open Telecom Ecosystem Lab. It's one part of the strategy, but then it passes through creating a pretty strong partnership program with different players in the industry and making sure that the solutions that are available in the ecosystem, they are, first of all, objective reference architecture, validated solution, even getting, in some cases, to an integrated solution. So when the communication service provider, when the operator are actually looking for what is the best solution to implement for each part of their network, for each use case that they may have, they know there is actually already a wide array of solutions that are pre-tested, pre-integrated, readily available, that can be deployed fast. Because one of the things that is behind this whole transition for our customers is the agility, right? So the opportunities that they have in front of them and the agility that they are going to need to actually leverage these opportunities. So for us, and basically, I believe that for everyone in the industry, part of the challenge is to make sure that decisions can be made faster, deployments can be made faster. So we create this sense of speed in the industry that has not been there for a while, I would say.
Yeah, I say it's a good point, because it's really all about sort of zero-touch processes and not sending guys to drive out to cell sites. I remember building my very first network back many years ago, and it take months to bring up a cell site, because you've got to build the equipment, ship it to site, ensure the right software was loaded, send guys out there 10 times to fix it. Whereas, with virtualized solutions, and I think, we're seeing this for some of the numbers from Rakuten, but, like 4 minutes from a software load and on the air, and then constant integration, constant development, the ability to, continually put new features and new services into place as the network is live. And, I think that's the exciting part about it. It's like a living amoeba, that this network is going to live and die by the quality of the software and the quality of the integration that sits on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I look at what we're all delivering together in the market, and what we are ultimately delivering on is this sort of notion of openness and encouraging or engendering more agility in how these network operators will, bring new services to market. And then ultimately programmability, right? The ability to change things and orchestrate new services, the ability to do that, on the fly as the needs of their business and their customers' needs change. I think that's exciting, what's coming from Open RAN. And, you guys were talking a little bit about the reference architectures, and for, in layman's terms, I think about the reference architectures as being more or less like the secret decoder ring, steps 1 through 100, and all the elements you need to be successful. It's sort of like read the manual, right?
Right.
We don't all have time to read the manuals, so there's a kind of a transcript of a kind of a fast path, a quick start that helps us be successful as we look to deploy these, honestly, rather complex environments. John, can you give me some background on the reference architecture itself, sort of where you guys are focused, and both of you actually, some elements of the reference architecture for our audience to appreciate?
Yeah, so from an overall end-to-end perspective, Mavenir is very much in the DU, CU, the centralized unit and the distributed unit, and the interfaces between those units. Now, those interfaces have essentially been defined by 3GPP and ORAN on the DU to RIU side. But on top of that, there's this whole layer of virtualization management, the CMS or element manager or whatever you want to call it. But the whole, the glue, if you like, that brings all the pieces together and makes it work. Now, it's fairly straightforward that anybody can make one work. It's when you've got to support hundreds of subscribers in different virtual containers, and there may even be different virtual networks sitting on the same server. We've got customers that are actually using Open RAN architectures for neutral host systems, where you have multiple operators sitting on multiple VMs on multiple layers, and so the complexity of this things that is scaling in many different directions. But from a reference architecture, it's really down to make this look cookie cutter as you possibly can, so that you can apply standard test scripts and standard load tests and performance parameters that what's on. And certainly from a Mavenir perspective, we spend a lot of time in terms of building up what we call test lanes, where we can test end to end in a fully loaded RF environment to really prove that the various layers from a virtualization perspective, from the VMware side of it to the hardware interfaces from the drivers, all working properly. And because again, it's a new way of working, new way of building networks with different forms of hardware and software, and the operator really at this stage is just gaining trust in the sense of are all those things coming together and working correctly. Hopefully, we'll get to a point where most people will be like me. You open the box, throw away the manual, and then plug it in, and it should work. And that's the level that we've got to get to in the industry. No manuals, just plug it in and it'll work.
Yeah, our layer within the VMware stack is obviously the virtual infrastructure and containerization as a service, or container as a service, or cloud native infrastructure. The observability with our monitoring and analytics, but all the glue that for us in the reference architecture that stitches your world within Mavenir and the Dell world is the automation. It's about driving, the provisioning, the deployment, and then the configuration of all, if you will, those elements, as you said. Sandro, from a Dell Technologies perspective, obviously you're the bedrock in the solution. You're providing the compute, hardware compute infrastructure. Give us a little background on, the work you are doing on the reference architecture front with VMware and Mavenir.
Yeah, exactly. So specifically in the case of the reference architecture that was announced, that it was developed with VMware and Mavenir, it is all about applying the hardware solutions that we actually just announced that are built for the telecommunications domain, built for the far edge, like, for example, XR11 and XR12 servers that are ruggedized servers that are really meant to be deployed at the base station side, at the radio side, or even in a central office location. And then, of course, depending on the case, also the R750, which is also an architecture that works really well for the telecom domain. And on top of that, of course, providing additional capabilities on top of the bare server to optimize the performance to support the RAN workload, which is a pretty demanding one. So for sure, using state-of-the-art processors like the third generation Intel Xeon scalable processors, ASICs-based acceleration cards as well to optimize some of the processes. And then we're also implementing the Intel FlexRun 5G architecture. So with all that, I mean, we create the solid foundation, as you said, the bedrock to support, to provide the power and to support the workloads that are going to be running to enable these Open RAN networks, right?
Well, I can already, appreciate the feedback from our customers who have seen that reference architecture, who are embarking on the journey of deployment. John mentioned Dish a few times. I mean, they're one particular service provider that we're working very closely with all together, and really is seeing the benefits of this joint collaboration. And that leads me to my last question. So what's next for Dell, for VMware and Mavenir in partnership? I'll say right away that, we're excited about the collaboration we've had thus far in the field, the cooperation as it relates to, all being, all having a seat at the table to define Open RAN and various parts of the Open RAN initiative. And, just to be able to go out there and deliver a reliable, predictable solution to our customers, something that they can build a business on and that they can provide guaranteed service and capability to their end customers on. So for us, it's about continuing to, if you will, double down on the existing investments we've made today as partners and to continue to innovate and iterate upon that foundation. I'll bring it back to you, Sandra. What's your view of the three-way partnership?
Yeah, so for sure, I mean, continuing with the strong partnership with Mavenir and VMware, there is a lot of value and that we are actually already seeing some of the latest deals that we closed, that customers give a lot of value to this collaboration, and they see these the solution that we put together as something that can really help them deploy their first 5G Open RAN networks. And for us, it's also, I mean, as you all know, in June, we announced our renewed strategy for telecom. We are really investing heavily in building telecom capabilities within Dell Technologies. The Open Telecom Ecosystem Lab is one part of it that I talked about earlier today as well. So really continuing the execution, continuing the partnership with great partners as you guys, and really deliver on the contracts that we already signed, which are great ones and are going to be actually great showcases for the rest of the world. So.
John?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really about deliver on what we have. I think if you go back 4 years and say, oh, okay, you'll be sitting here supplying some of the tier one operators around the world with a new, technology implementation, if you like, of an old product that people just say you're dreaming. I remember the discussion 4 years ago that, this isn't going to happen. Well, it's happened. We're here. Now we've got to prove it, so it's all about now focus, deliver on what we promised. And then I think the opportunity is just tremendous in terms of, as the world goes more mobile in terms of, fixed wireless access, millimeter wave, sub-6 programs, around the globe, there's always demand for spectrum, there's always demand for mobile networks, and just the speed that we're actually being able to move now, we're turning up networks between the three of us in days, not having to worry about ordering specialized components and stuff like that. So it's about focus, delivery, quality.
Well, John, Sandro, I want to thank you both for being a part of today's session. And it is great to have a seat at the table between Dell, VMware, and Mavenir to help influence the direction of Open RAN and to really help our customers accelerate their path to 5G. Thanks again, guys, for today's session, and we hope the attendees enjoy the content.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be at the table with you guys.
Yeah.